Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Deep Dive with Harry Turpin. I'm your host, Harry Turpin, and I'm excited to have you join me as we get to know people in our community in a deeper fashion. Here's how the show works. I'll have a guest, we'll have a list of conversation topics I want to cover, and then we'll go from there. This next hour and a half is really meant to be a conversation. So if my guest says something I think is interesting or we want to go into further, we will take a deep dive. This means my topics may or may not be covered, which is totally okay. It just means we get to know our guest a little bit better. We will always have the option for you to ask questions. You can ask right on the live stream itself, either on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll be able to share them and discuss them with our guest. I can't guarantee that I will get to every question, but I will do my best, as I want you to be able to interact with our guest as well. Speaking of our guest, I first encountered Tyler not in person, but by his work. I saw a fantastic production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, which he had directed. From there, I got to work alongside him in a production of The Fantasticks, which we will discuss later in the show. I'm a huge fan of his work, and just him, as he's just a delightful person to be around, and I'm excited to have him on the show. So a little bit about Tyler. Tyler Harr is a Seattle-based actor and director, originally from St. Louis, Missouri. Tyler holds a BFA in theater from the University of Illinois. As a director, Tyler has worked with Seattle theaters such as Village Theatre's KIDSTAGE, Centerstage, and SecondStory Repertory. As an actor, he's acted with Seattle Musical Theater, SecondStory Repertory, and others. His most recent source of pride and joy is his direction of the briefly run but beautifully performed Fantasticks. Please welcome to the show, Tyler Harr. Hi,
Hey,
Tyler.
Harry.
Hi, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm pumped. I'm excited.
It's good to see you.
You too.
So just as a reminder to all of our friends out there who are watching and are curious to know what Tyler thinks about whatever, feel free to send some questions in and we will pop them in throughout the show where we can. We will also have a Q&A at the very end of the show. All right, Tyler. So let's start. How are you?
I'm well. There's a lot going on in the world, and I took some time to be afraid and sad about all of it, and I'm excited to keep moving forward and see how we can do that together. And I'm doing well.
Good. That's good. Do you have a nice support network? Are you sheltered in place with a good group of folks? You feel supported?
I do. I'm very fortunate to live on a small little island of misfit toys. That's what we call ourselves. We're just a little mismatched trio of very different people, and we're all very exciting. In a room together, bouncing off ideas with one another, or just hanging out and doing nothing. That's kind of what a lot of us need now.
That's awesome. That's great. And just if you want to share, are these friends of yours from previous life? Did you meet them all here? How long does
they're random. They're random.
Really? Just random people.
Yeah, I looked for the place to live first, and I was very lucky to find 2 people living in that place already that have my heart.
Oh, good. Well, thanks again for being here. Again, for anybody who's just tuning in, we are interviewing with Tyler Harr, actor and director here in Seattle. And if you have questions for Tyler, go ahead and pop them in the comments. We will grab them. You have many fans, people who are already saying hello, from Bobby and Elizabeth and Britt.
Hi, everyone.
And things like that. So let's start at the beginning, Tyler. Tell me where you first got interested in theater. Was it like a big presence in your house growing up?
No, it wasn't. Most of my family members have this kind of baseline musical talent or sort of performed aspect to them. And I'm grateful to have that. But I did start performing very young. I like to look at my report cards from a long time ago, and they would all say, Tyler makes unnecessary noises with his mouth in class. Haters. But if you need a 8-year-old Bob Cratchit, who are you going to call?
Well, sure. That's amazing.
So that's where it started, 8-year-old Bob Cratchit.
So did you get that you were a joy to having class? Like that usually means that they're the theater kid or or gay kid. But usually if they're a joy to having class, yes, it's just they're calling it out without calling it out for sure.
Yeah. But I was pretty well liked, and like when it came time to perform for real, I mean, they called me because they knew I could do it, and so I really sunk my teeth into piano lessons and music. I was a band kid. I played alto saxophone. Before I left high school, I made sure to join the choir and get on stage a little bit. That's really where I found a major shift in my attitude towards the arts.
So it sounds like you were pretty involved, not necessarily through maybe family pushing, but of your own volition in terms of getting involved in the arts and things like that. At what point did you decide that this was what you wanted to do with your life? And was there any
Uh,
pushback, or were people pretty supportive of your dreams?
yeah, I made this switch in college. Oddly enough, for the longest time, and these same people that were upset about me making too many noises, I would play with Tinker Toys a lot and sing while I was and Legos and things like that. And I was always told, you're either going to be an engineer or you're going to be an actor. Well, joke's on them. I have been both. I went to the University of Illinois for engineering originally, and I was doing plays outside of those classes because that's what brought me joy. I was not finding joy in my field. So I really had to have a come to Jesus with myself. And the Penny Dreadful Players were a student group in college. And my director of the show is watching. I know I was sort of tricked into playing the role of Satan in the last days of Judas Iscariot.
Tricked.
Thank
Okay. How are you
God.
tricked? How are you tricked into playing the role of
There's
Satan?
a deep dive, right?
Yes,
Okay.
let's go into that. Like, it sounds
So,
like Lucifer himself was at work. Tell us that story.
right. I had friends in college that pushed me to do a production of Rumors with the Penny Dreadful Players, and board members from that student-run organization saw me in that show, and one of them came to me and was like, "Hey, I'm directing this thing next year. I need you to read it." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds fun," and I did, and I thought, I'm flunking my classes because I'm not doing my homework. I'm memorizing lines. Um, and so I gave her a lot of pushback about like, no, I can't come in for this. I love it. I can't come in. And in the audition room, if you know me from Seattle, I run a good audition table. I was also doing that in college. And she was like, hey, we have someone in here that doesn't have a reader. We need you to read for Satan. How could I say no?
Well, right. I mean, it's the role of a lifetime for sure.
Right. And I did it. And she emailed me that night and she's like, we need you. Come do it. And I did. And I had just come out to the people closest to me.
Mhm.
And that was the first time that I remember I could unabashedly be myself on stage and insert myself into a character with no shame, asking neither permission or forgiveness.
So you're in school, you're there for engineering, you've just come out, you've just been offered the role of Satan, which I don't know if they correlate or not, but you've just been offered that role. At what point do you decide, hey, I'm not going to do engineering anymore? This is really where my bliss is. This is where I'm happiest.
It was a couple semesters later.
Mhm.
And at the same time that I was coming out to my folks, to answer your question about pushback, I really didn't receive a lot of pushback, more a lot of, oh, how are you going to make money? That kind of thing. And I figured I would figure that out later. But it was really, can you repeat your question? I'm sorry. I've been
Sure,
sidetracked.
no worries, no worries. But you said it was a couple semesters later before you essentially decided that you were going to move from engineering into theater. So,
Yeah.
and you said that there wasn't necessarily any pushback from coming out and things like that. I'm just wondering if there was one specific moment, or was it really being cast in the show and just finding that that's where your joy was? Was it an overnight decision?
Mhm.
You woke up one morning and said, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to engineer things. I want to do theater. That's where my calling is." Was there anything
Yeah.
that you can say that kind of prompted you that, or was it just a gradual evolution?
It was sort of gradual. And part of my strategy for coming out as an artist to my family was part of that was trying to find an integration between the engineering world and theater, because they were very comfortable financially for me studying engineering. And so when I told them that I wanted to do theater for the rest of my life in some capacity, I thought that it would be audio engineering, oddly enough, because I wasn't ready to tell them I'm not an engineer. I wasn't ready for that. And so I thought that we'd mix the two. And so I got into music theory classes because they were prerequisites for my audio engineering classes. And I really just ate them up. I have an instinct for that thing, and I have a love for it, and I forgot. And so 2.5 years into college, I was reminded, and I thought, this is the time to go full on, because if I wait any longer, it's more and more and more debt. So I took an extra year, call it a victory lap, did what I wanted, and I believe I'm much happier than I would have been.
Good. And here you are. So you finish school, and at some point you move out here to Seattle. So what is it that brought you this way? What was it? Was it our balmy summer days? Was it like, the palm tree swaying? What was it that brought you out to the Emerald City?
Seattle really came to me, if I'm being honest. In college, I was required to have an internship to graduate with a degree. That was part of it. And while there were options on campus, there were options all around home. And my very best friend that I lived with for my last 2 years of college, she said to me, if you have to have an internship, go wherever you want. Experience the beginning of your life wherever you want. And there was a Seattle bandwagon. I won't deny it. There was a Seattle bandwagon. And I said, well, let's check out Seattle. So among applications that I put in to Chicago, St. Louis and Seattle, I was lucky enough to connect with KIDSTAGE, Village Theatre KIDSTAGE out in Issaquah regarding a directing internship with their very high octane production of School of Rock.
I saw that production. It was lovely.
Oh, it was massive. Yeah.
Yeah. It was crazy.
Yeah. We talk about it. We still talk about it. My mentors, I was assisting the director, Timothy Piguet, the choreographer was Catherine Van Meter, and the music director was RJ Tansioko. I call them my trifecta. I don't know if they know that, but that's what I call them. And they were my first points of contact, really, to the artistic world here. And so we did a huge show, 50 plus kids, right? We conquered a ton of problems. And I made some friends that summer. So when I went back and I finished, I had a year left to finish up my degree, but I stayed in contact with these people, and Catherine worked near me in the Midwest. So I went and visited her and saw some work she did. And the stars kind of aligned, and I think clarity came to me, and I said, these are where my connections are. This is where I've started to build a foundation. This is where I can start. And it doesn't have to be forever, but I'd be silly if I didn't start here with all the friends I already have.
That's great. And we're glad to have you here. That production of School of Rock was fantastic. And for those of you who don't know the show, the kids play the music live on stage, or not necessarily on this. They're doing that as well, but they're also, the kids in the pit are also all kids. Is that right? Like, it's not adult musicians.
Well, the way that we did it, when we did it, it hadn't closed on Broadway yet. And so, or the rights hadn't been released yet. One of those two truths. But the truth is that when you leased this thing, you had to commit to having all performers under the age of 18. So these, the creative team and the music directors, RJ was not allowed to play the piano. He could only conduct. Yeah. And so the kids on stage were also playing these instruments, and I had no idea what I was stepping into. I was so ready and like so starry eyed and sunny and walking in, and these kids were cooler than me. And it was really an incredible experience. And the second I left, I couldn't wait to get back.
That's awesome. So you go back, you finish school, you then come back out to Seattle. You are relatively new here, and so you're able to see our community with a fresh set of eyes. What were your initial thoughts about this community here at large, both good and bad?
Yeah, I had a big challenge from the people that I was telling I was an artist, that about how am I going to make money and how am I going to sustain myself. And the more I worked, working is always a learning opportunity for me. And I was always looking for proof that I can make a living here in the arts. And that proof was coming to me. Yeah. And I think that's a big reason why I gravitated here. But some of the great things about Seattle are some of the sticky things about Seattle as well that I found. There's
a little bit more about that? Right.
Everywhere. Right. No matter, when we're not in a pandemic, obviously, there's theater and art at all times. And if I ever have someone visit that wants to see theater, I tell them I always have a mile-long laundry list of things they can see, which is really great. If you're moving to Seattle to do theater, there's always something for you to do. Um, it's also full of, I think, resources for pre-professionals and young actors, young directors, as well as a really solid community of people that wanted my success. That's my experience, is that I get here and I have a lot of people that are rooting me on before they really even know me. And that's a really incredible thing to step into. I think on the other hand, some of those things can be sticky as well. Seattle has a really rich history, right? A lot of these people, I've worked with a lot of our Seattle favorites and our Seattle legends, and I look to these people for how to be a real professional artist. These people get me out of bed in the morning so that I can aspire to be like them. And this rich history sometimes is hard to permeate as a new idea, or a new person coming in.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that? This rich history is harder to permeate. I want to hear more about your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. The more that I talk about Seattle theater, I fall more and more in love with these people that are on stage, because I'm seeing them all the time, because they're really talented. They're stars, right? Seattle loves their stars. I love Seattle stars, and I go to see them. And I sometimes think that stars can be the default when looking for casting options, because they are safe and because they will turn it out for you every single time.
There's familiarity in there's a safety in that familiarity for a lot of companies.
There is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There is. And for any, new actor or director that's hitting the scene right now, I hope you understand that your first work is going to come because someone took a risk on you, right? And so you have to be willing to prove that you're worth that risk before someone can take that risk on you. But that is a challenge that most new actors will face anywhere. And I think part of Seattle too, where there's a ton of things going on, we do have a very small selection of professional union houses where you're getting work for a living wage. And a lot of the smaller and semi-pro theaters around have volumes to teach all of you. But it is difficult to leave college with a degree and start working in your field full time if you work in theater.
Yes, and there are a handful of folks here in Seattle who are incredibly fortunate to be able to make a full-time living doing that. And without the we don't have necessarily the same infrastructure that New York did, of course, pre-corona and all that other stuff, in terms of being able to support a lot of those artists. And I think we all aspire to get to that position, right? Where we don't have to do the 9-to-5 slaving, working in an office thing.
Mm-hmm. And again, think about the people that I came into contact with the first time I ever landed in Seattle, thinking this is what is here for me.
Right.
And so when I get to town and I figure out what a small stipend really is, that could be kind of but again, it's a matter of adjusting your perspective.
For sure.
Learning how the community around you fits in with your purpose and your mission as a person, and making that work for you. There's a million ways to do it.
Right. And having that information certainly allows you to make that decision whether you're going to do that, play or that show for a very small amount of money. You're not doing it necessarily for the money, you're doing it for the experience. And as much as we hate to say that, because we all want to be paid as professionals, sometimes you do it because it's a passion project. And sometimes you're like, I'm going to gain more out of this experience. And
that's part of the reason I stay in it, is because nobody in that room with me is ever in it for the money.
Right.
They're all in it with this common goal to make a big, beautiful show. If we were in it for the money, we would be engineers.
Absolutely. But that ship has sailed, Tyler. No, I'm just kidding. But I want to move on just a little bit. We've got some great questions coming in, and we'll get to one of them in just a minute. You are on both sides of the table and performing as well as directing. And when you and I were chatting last week, you had mentioned that the perfect blend for you would be a 50-50 split of both worlds.
Mhm.
So how do you see performing and directing linked, and what does it do for your directing when you're acting and you're acting while you're directing?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's, I have this conversation all the time, and I focus mostly on the adult world. I do work with youth and pre-professionals, but the adult world is really where I can speak to this kind of thing. Um, in all my successful productions, a rehearsal room has really been a dialogue of and a conversation and a negotiation of needs between your actor and your director, right? Um, I have a few things that I look for in an audition room that we'll touch on in a bit. But if those things are true, I can rely on actors, you know, I can rely on actors to do the work that is expected generally of an actor. And so it is this communication of needs, right? It's as much on me to know what my actors need to do their best work as it is on my actors to know what I need from them, right? And so it's a constant reminder to me when I'm flipping back and forth on other sides of the table of, I know what the big picture looks like here as the director. I know how to communicate that to an actor, or I know how to say, this is what you can do as an actor to fit into the big picture, right? It's a language that I have and that I've developed from using both sides of the argument that has really come into handy when I'm looking to get things out of actors or when I'm looking for information from a director. If I can't get it, I have this director's instinct that fills in the holes, right? Because a director can't possibly choreograph every move that they want an actor to do. But if you have the directing intuition, you can fill in these holes. So I would say to you, if you're an actor who's never worked on the other side of the table, look to assist someone, right? Assisting is a lot of observing, taking notes, keeping your mouth closed, knowing when your voice is needed, but you can really max out on the learning, and you can really get some director instinct in your mind that will come in handy when you're on stage.
Absolutely. I always encourage people to, if they can, to sit on the other side of the table just for a round of auditions and or callbacks just to watch the process. You learn so much being on the other side.
Volumes.
We're going to take a quick question here. Elizabeth asked, what is your advice to actors and performers that are nervous to take the leap into the arts? So as somebody who is doing both of those things, what would you say to those folks who are nervous about taking that first step?
You can never ask someone to take a risk on you and hire you in a show if you're not willing to take a risk on your own career. I really do believe that. And while that sounds like taking a leap can be a big, scary thing, Elizabeth, I hope you really look into your mind and discover what makes you nervous about that, and discover why your purpose and your motivations to go into the arts are stronger than what scares you about the arts. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's a great answer. Thank you, Tyler. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here. For those of you watching, I'm interviewing Tyler Harr, and we're having a great conversation. We're going to talk about a couple of other things here. Before we do that, I'd like to take this time to just acknowledge everything that's going on in the world right now with regards to race equality and representation of people of color. And I'd also like to take this time to say that Black Lives Matter. Regarding the world right now, Tyler, and particularly events over the last week and a half, is there anything you'd like to say at this particular moment to anybody who's watching?
Mm-hmm. I thank you for saying Black Lives Matter. It seems to be a difficult 3 words to get out of some people, and I'm happy that you were able to share that, and I'm happy I'm in a room where that is a value.
Thank you.
I think that when it comes to things I'd like to say to people, Harry here is setting a good example of how to use a platform and lift up voices, right? Look to the examples, look to what's coming in the future for this show, for a real model. on how to start talking about these things if you're unaware. I think to my Black Indigenous friends and my friends of color, I am right beside you, and that is, if it hasn't been evident yet, it's about to be very evident. And I can't say too much more to you that you have not already lived, right? My listening ear is more important to my Black friends and to my friends of color than my moving mouth. To my white friends, I remind you that this is our problem to solve. We're about 400 years late. Yeah, we've been sitting in our original sin of slavery and racism in this country for about 400 years, right? That's about how long white people have been in America. And if you can't see the problem right now, I really encourage you to sit with you and re-examine your values. But it's gonna start with this attentive listening ear. Yeah. We're listening to understand. We're not listening to respond. Things like that. That's going to be our real foundation, right? Look around you, find these problems in the world. I don't think you have to look very far. I also want to encourage my white friends, if you haven't, start consuming Black art. Start consuming Black art in more ways than you are used to. You've mentioned that to me pretty recently, Harry, about how that's like a commitment that people should make, is like they think that they're doing enough and see what more they can do. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I had to check myself on this week was whether or not I was doing that. I do my best to get out and see shows specifically put on by people of color, by Black artists, and things like that, because if I want Black artists to be able to produce Black art, we need to support Black art, right? And so I do my best to get out and see those shows and support and see movies by Black artists and reading books by Black authors. But as I was going through this checklist, one of these checklists that I found online, that's like, check your white privilege. I realized that I still have a lot of work to do. There's so many things that, they were talking about, name the 3 journalists and name the 3 authors and name this. And I had to stop and go, can I do that? I think I can do that, but gosh, if I have to think about it, then I have work to do. So, So, and it was one of many things that made me uncomfortable this week in terms of just facing that privilege and addressing it head on. So my question to you,
as far as sorry to interrupt you, but as far as consuming Black art, I will remind you that there are a million ways to do that, right?
Absolutely.
We hear the call to action all the time to get out and see these shows that are happening in Seattle, and I hear, oh, I don't have the money. Oh, I don't have the time. I'm in rehearsal. Oh, this and that. And okay, but this is something I'm excited to share, but I learned through my training, and as my journey with consuming Black art really started in my dance classes. I learned my rhythm tap drills to Kendrick Lamar's Untitled Unmastered, and I turned out just fine,
Right.
And Charlie Maybe Farrell is my tap teacher from college. Go look him up, tell him that you love him. He opened my eyes to the world of hip hop. I had been ignoring it for a very, very long time. And there's something for everyone there. So dance teachers, tap teachers, as we move forward and you're instilling these values in your kids, if there's ever been a time to put down the 42nd Street album and back away slowly,
now is the time.
Yeah, right now.
And you brought up something that I think is really, really important. I think it's really easy and I'm going to stand on my soapbox for just a moment. But if anybody knows me, I am ridiculously busy almost all of the year. I'm jetting from one rehearsal to the next rehearsal to a performance to doing all of those things. But I make it a real effort to find time to support those artists that need to be supported, because without our support, those things go away. And then we say, oh, it's a shame that we lost X theater company. It's a shame that we lost this particular company, when we ourselves have the power to do something about that.
The power.
And there's strength and there's strength and solidarity in showing up to support somebody else's art. And gosh, what a learning experience too. You were talking about being on other side of the tables. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in the audience of performances and went, huh, I never would have thought of doing something that way. I never would have thought of
Right.
that. Wow, what an amazing thing. Oh my gosh, the way that they painted that picture with their staging, it's great. It's a continual education. It doesn't matter
That's your
where it's coming
research.
from. It's
That's your work.
absolutely. So, it is incumbent upon all of us to do that work. It is not, it's super easy to make the excuse. We have to go beyond that and be smart about the choices that we're making and why we're saying no. I can't do it is an easy way out. And frankly, I think that we're done with easy way outs. I'm going to
Right.
step off
And
my soapbox
yeah.
a little bit, but
Yeah.
um, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you, I shared in terms of supporting, Black artists and people of color in general, and just that art, and how uncomfortable that made me this week. What can you share one or two different things from this past week that made you uncomfortable and allowed you to check yourself and your biases with an intent to grow?
Yeah. Yes, I can. The first couple days of this thing, I couldn't pull myself away from the TV. Like I couldn't pull myself away from the news and watching things going down in my own backyard. And I will be 100% honest with you that I had about 3 days of just paralysis and anxiety and being sick. And the healing came from the action, right? Thank you to everyone out there who has said, like, this is not a time for silence. This is not a time for me to be quiet, right? If I have ideas that are supportive, it's time to talk about them. And so the first few days, I had to say, like, all right, what are my action items? Where can I start? And it was as simple for me as joining the NAACP for $30, getting an infinitely long, list of petitions categorized by public health, education for Black, Indigenous folks. I mean, it's so many people have been doing the work and putting it in front of me. And so I got out to get that, and I felt some healing there. I also had a lot of fear about calling my rather conservative hometown friends and family, and talking on this kind of thing, because that has been the real source of my silence, and part of my flaw is my inability to speak up about it with dissenting opinions. And so a commitment to having these hard conversations. I've called my mother and had some of the most beautiful chats we've ever had in my life in the past few days.
What came out of that conversation with your mom? What was the thing that, like, if you were to give a takeaway from that conversation, what would that be?
I think that my mom has instilled in me for a very, very long time that care about everyone equally. And my main point with my mom had to be, hey, not everyone needs our help right now. It's not a matter of life and death for everyone. It is a matter of life and death for our Black Indigenous friends. It is a matter of life and death for our POC friends, right? I said, yes, care about everyone, but you can't claim to do that until you can say to me that you care about Black people. And she did. And I know this about my mom. I know this about my family. And for some reason, it's been hard to get people to say these things out loud because, well, I don't know why. I understand connection to a movement, and I understand the tendency in America to politicize everything. But when I really broke it down, and when I'm having these tough conversations, I have to say, this isn't a blue and red thing. This isn't Democrat liberal. This is basic human rights. Basic. And breaking it down that to be something that basic for some people can really help. For whatever biases and things that people I care about hold, they are rational people. I do surround myself with rational people. And if you've built relationships with people like this, like I have with my mother for 26 years, you should be able to talk to people like this. You should be able to talk about it in an effective way. And I don't think that anyone could talk to my mom about it better than I could.
Right.
And so
So
that's a responsibility of mine.
so out of this conversation and basically the challenge, it sounds as though there was a period of time for you where speaking up was just something that you would not do. Is that an action that you've committed to moving forward in order to be a better ally? Is being able to
Y-
recognize that and speaking up?
Yeah, yeah, you must. You have to. You have to. Um, it's the only silence is complacency. You hear it all the time. You must speak up when you hear these things. Your beliefs are only as good as the voice that you give to them.
Tyler, as you are thinking about moving forward in your career and working with organizations, whether on stage or behind the scenes, what are you going to be looking for with those companies to make sure that they're not only allies but holding themselves accountable to the statements that they've put out this week? We all know that everybody has issued a statement this week, in the last week and a half, to basically say we stand with Black people and we're here. As you're moving forward, how do you acknowledge that to make sure that it's aligning with your values and the allyship that you're wanting to project into the world and to live, so that
Mhm.
way it is a fulfilling experience, and also holding those companies accountable?
Yeah, I will be looking for things as I move forward and I start working with different theaters. I'm going to be very clear about what my values are on racial equity and justice, just kind of like I am being right now. But I these theaters that have put out these statements, yes, I believe you, and right, your your values are only as strong as the voice that you give to them. So when it comes down to action items, that's really that's really what's going to make change, right? A statement of solidarity is great, but we stand with you, we love you, see you when we reopen is not. And so a lot of theaters around town understand that, and I'm happy to see it. But as far as specific values that I'll probably be looking for as we go forward, that I will be looking for, um, I have a little bit of a message to Seattle. I think that it's time that we stop patting ourselves on the back for color conscious casting. I want that to be very clear. It's something that we've been doing for a while, and it's something that we point to every time someone calls us to the carpet about our inaction on equity and justice. So I think that it's time that we keep going with that. Again, yes, and here's what else we can do, right? I'm going to, as I apply to these places, I'm going to look for how they vet me. Yeah. Um, I'm fortunate that the way that I work, I have to apply to a new thing or audition for a new thing every couple months. And it really strengthens my ability to speak about what I believe in. Yay, glad I'm in the arts, because I practice it all the time. But I'm looking for companies that are going to rehire their people based on statements from these people about what they are going to do. I'm talking written statements, right? About what they're going to do to uphold the values of your institution. I'm looking to educate with organizations that can tell me and that can ask of me, how am I going to get these values into the classroom? Yeah, I I had a conversation with KIDSTAGE, Village Theatre KIDSTAGE. They sent out an email. They added on to Village Theater's main statement saying, you are our community, our educators. Come with ideas and I applaud that, right? So I think keep looking to your educators in the way that you want as you hire, right? You're asking for solutions now. As you hire them, look for written statements on how they're going to uphold your values. For that to be possible, it's going to come from being very explicit
Very intentional.
about what
Hmm.
these values are. Very
Absolutely.
explicit. And that is something that the city is calling for from a lot of theaters. Be specific about what your values are. These vague "we stand with you" statements say don't say enough. They don't say
Right.
enough. So if you can be very specific, you can then turn around and vet the people that are coming to work for you to make sure that you're building it stronger and stronger every time you let someone through the door.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that the specificity as well as the intentionality of hiring people who are the right fit as opposed to just a warm body and who are going to
right,
continue the mission forward of the organization.
right.
Um,
And this
yeah,
is going to come from, it's not an easy thing to do to go into your organizations and completely revamp. But again, this is another call to action about who you're bringing into your organizations, right? I say that about fair and equitable casting because we've been doing it for a while, and it's time to look inward to our own organizations and see what is helping and hurting us inside. So I think expanding these tendrils, finding people, post on job boards through Black owned and Black run organizations, right? Kids, pre-professionals, adults go through these trusted organizations to find jobs. If you want these people coming to you, they're looking to their resources. So find these things. I'd like to see more youth companies, especially get into the city and get into underfunded schools. There's a really, really rich history and a really rich culture around youth theaters on the East Side, especially that I've worked with in my experience. And a lot of them, part of their mission is we serve the East Side. We build up students on the East Side, and I would encourage you reallocate some resources, right? I've been in these schools. These schools have massive overhead budgets. After they lease the shows from these companies and bring them in, they have massive budgets for fun things for kids on top. And so I think that if you remember that a lot of who is in these schools and how much money these schools have is really based and dictated by racist housing policies that have been in place for a very long time. And that dictates the demographic that you serve. So as a nonprofit serving the community, and I believe that these places do, see if, how can we reallocate these funds that are coming in from these really, really wealthy schools and use them to give back or to maybe provide scholarships for kids that would like to come from the underprivileged schools in Seattle. These schools need art, right? These underprivileged schools are choking. They need us. And so I hope that empowers a lot of, organizations to get out there, expand your tendrils, cast your nets wide and deep, and change lives. You are capable, and that's why people are coming to you, because you have the most power to do so.
thank you for sharing all of that, and I really appreciate your view as an educator. You answered this question from RMHS Theater YouTube channel, which says, "Which role do you think theater arts have in bringing about change for BIPOC in our society?" And
Yeah,
you've
it's
outlined
kids.
some great ways to do that, and certainly getting in and speaking to our kids and being able to instill those values early and
Mm-hmm.
and often.
And
Is
I will remind you, kids are such an honest and unbridled reflection of the world that we live in, right? They don't know, especially the young ones, they don't know how to lie yet. They don't know how to hide what they feel. And I don't want to work in a theater world where I can't learn from children for as long as I work, as long as I live, because that it starts there and it's impressionable. And the things that we say to these kids are forming the future. So yes, get this Black art into your dance classes. If your TAP students leave a 10-week session and they haven't heard of Bill Bojangles Robinson, if they haven't heard of the Nicholas Brothers, you've done a disservice. And I think we can recognize that.
absolutely, absolutely. It's incumbent upon us all to carry history forward and the true history forward, as
Right.
opposed to the whitewashed version that we want to tell. Um, All right, we're gonna. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm speaking with Tyler Harr, who is here and giving up his evening to be here. If you have a question for Tyler, go ahead and pop it in the comments, and I will do my best to get to it. Tyler, I want to switch gears just a little bit, and thanks for going through that last section with me. But I want to chat a little bit about COVID-19. I'm sure everybody is
Mhm.
sick about hearing about Miss Rona, but
I've heard of her.
yeah, she's made her way around. She gets around for sure. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what your experience was like. So, for those of you who don't know, I mentioned it in the beginning. I got to work with Tyler on a production of the Fantasticks. That was at Second Story Rep. He was directing the show. I was in the show, and we were working on the show. And as basically the world is changing in this huge sort of way with Corona and things are popping out, we are quickly and frantically working towards an opening night. And eventually our preview performance happens as the restricted gathering guidelines were going into place. And then before we get into what happened with production, Tyler, because it's a fun story, I want to
It
know
is.
what you were thinking and what plans you were formulating in order to keep your cast comfortable and at bay that week.
Mhm, mhm. Um, I I looked to my personal mission statement, and artists, if you don't have a personal mission statement, think about it. The first person to ever pop this idea into my head was Erica Matoba. Erica, if you're watching, I love you and thank you. Um, I Mine deals a lot with empathy. I really believe that I was put on this earth to um, teach and to exercise empathy as an example for other people. And so when it came down to coronavirus is hitting the world, we don't know if the show's going to go on. I was very fortunate that we were in tech, right? I was very fortunate that I was at tech at Second Story because they had given me the tools I needed, and our artistic work, our storytelling work was done on stage. We had done a lot of really rigorous cleaning and detail work before we moved into tech, so that all actors kind of had to do was stand up there and say the lines when we were ready to throw lights on it, right? So when hit with this extra emotional, I guess, blow, I had no problem just kind of shooting the breeze with actors before they went into rehearsal. Or, I was lucky to have some personal friends in the cast that I said, "Hey, how is everybody doing?" Like, honestly. So it was a constant checking in with people's feelings. But again, I looked to my personal mission statement about empathy and the reason that I do theater. And the solutions were very clear to me. My role in the coronavirus come down was very clear to me. I had already directed you. You had
Right.
already done beautifully. And I'm here to talk it out between my notes taking. Yeah.
Right, right. For those of you who are wondering why you're seeing You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown pictures mixed in with the Fantasticks, this is the slideshow we put together. These are shows that Tyler has directed. It is not some weird hybrid production, although that would be fascinating to see. The kids from the Peanuts gang wandering their way over behind the wall. It might be an interesting
I don't
show. I
know
don't know.
what I
But
do with
that's
that.
what, yeah, that's what you're looking at right now. So Tyler, the show decides to do the preview, right? We all made that decision. Mark Chenovic called us in. We had a conversation. We were all on board, and we decided to do our preview and subsequent two performances.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about what was decided to ensure the cast was safe, the crew was safe, as well as the patrons?
I can. I'll say it again. I was very lucky to be doing this at Second Story Repertory with the Chanovic team. Yeah. They followed the CDC guidelines to the letter, really, and then some. Right? They shifted ticket sales, and this is all, mind you, happening overnight. Right? Things changed overnight as this is going on, and we're going into our preview thinking, "Oh, we're going to run this thing. We'll just do it with limited audiences, what have you." So that kept a lot of us happy and going forward. But going into opening weekend, they shifted ticket sales to box office and phone calls only. You couldn't order online because they wanted to audibly discourage ticket buyers and patrons from coming and exposing themselves. I
What a
was
weird idea, right?
surprised. Yeah.
What a
And I was
weird
shocked by
thing.
the number of people that were like, that's fine, I'll take one, right? Or that's fine, I'll take one for all of my whole family. So we used every other row. Mark stayed hours, Jen stayed hours afterwards, lysoling every single armrest, every single chair, right? The drive home was fun, lots of fumes. But they just activated and somehow did it. And I would think it was kind of a miracle. And I know that they made it look like a miracle, but it was a lot of hard work.
For sure. And I think I can speak on behalf of the entire cast about how grateful we were to at least do those 2 performances. I mean, imagine, and I know that there are so many theaters that were in the same situation, rehearsing right up to opening night and then not being able to do their show.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit what it was like putting the show together, what discoveries you made during the process, and what it was like working with each cast member?
Yeah. I can say, yeah, I think that especially in the context of coronavirus, I learned how much the process means to me. I was very product focused because, my main goals are these big flashy things, and those are long-term goals for my life, these big flashy shows. And right now I'm working on mostly just purely storytelling. And so I had this when I would take the 45-minute drive home and think, it was, if this show doesn't go up, I still have to find a victory here for myself and for the rest of the cast. And that wouldn't have been hard for me, right? If that show never went up, I had a million good things that I could say and that I could take on to the rest of my career to make me a better artist in person.
Do you want to share some of those?
Yeah. As the way that the cast was able to collaborate really blew my mind, right? I tried not to say it too often, but at some points I would have given my left foot for a choreographer. And but I had plenty of notice knowing, hey, you don't have a choreographer. That's okay. See what you can do with engaging movement, things like that. So when I was in the auditions and looking for people, I had some questions about, what is your dance history? What's your history with choreography, things like that, because I knew you can't do plant a radish without some kind of step,
right?
You can't do, in my opinion, depends on what you pay, without some, this big flashy engaging movement. And so, the selection and cast members had a lot to do with physicality, because I knew we were going to have to max out on collaboration there. So I'm very grateful. It's the first thing I said to you all at the first day is, I'm a wish list director. I come with, 4 or 5 points per scene that must happen for the rest of the play to keep moving. For the story to have a solid arc, everything else in between, bring me whatever you can think of, and we'll try to make it work, because that's an actor's, in my opinion, that's an actor's craft. And so I was very fortunate that every single person in that room brought me some of the biggest funny ha-has I've ever seen in my life.
That's great. What did you learn? You kind of answered this, but I just want to make sure that there are no loose ends here. What did you learn more about yourself and your directing style that you could carry forward from that experience?
Story above all. That's something I'm learning a lot. And like I said, I learned the value of a process, and taking actors' ideas and hearing their voices in the room. That is, repeat your question. I'm sorry.
No, just the question was, what did you learn more about yourself and your directing style that you could carry forward? And you mentioned the storytelling process. I'm curious if you could point to maybe 1 or 2 examples from that rehearsal process that highlighted how important the story was for you.
Yeah, I think especially the wall in the Fantastics was it's the Fantastics is weird. If you've never seen it, it's weird. It's so weird, and I think that the wall almost kind of took on its own character. But we were working in a black box. We were working in a tiny theater where we can't take a wall and just move it off stage. So we had to figure out how we're going to tell a story of this wall gets off stage. We're going to tell how this wall gets built back up. It's the same thing with, you know, how is this person going to climb into a tree and make it look like, this tree is blowing in the wind. It's the story. These elements are nuance, and they build a world that you can believe a story like the Fantastics, which is so absurd. So world building, right? It's really about setting up this environment that you can tell a beautiful story in, trusting my ability to tell a story, so that when we get to tech, and the tech elements are all over the place because they always are, and we're always trying to figure out in a very, very short amount of time how to make them work, I could focus on that. And I didn't know that.
It's a good
Before.
feeling. Isn't it a good feeling, like, to go into that tech process and go, look, we've done the work and we have a good solid story, and whatever happens, whether the paint is dry or the walls are falling or whatever, we can trust that we've done the work that we need to do.
Yeah.
And
And you could put up, we didn't do Fantastics like it's normally done on one platform. We had a
it
really
was
full
fully
scene.
realized. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you could see on the photos and things like that, but it's, that was a luxury that I had, but I never took that for granted because it was still about the story,
Absolutely.
right? You're forced to tell a story with no set pieces and props, but when you have them, don't forget to tell the story and don't get distracted by the
Right,
crazy set
exactly.
pieces and props. Yeah.
Exactly. Tyler, I want to talk a little bit about what, as you're directing and you're sitting behind the table and casting for a production, um, what's the most important thing that you are looking to see from an actor that makes you sit up and say, yes, I want to work with that person?
Yeah, and I these aren't new ideas, and I'm sure you've heard them before. I look primarily for a real technical foundation. I believe that an actor with a technical foundation in a room, the possibilities are endless, right? If you have an actor that has technique and can say yes, you can do almost anything. And I hope that doesn't scare folks that don't have a formal degree or don't have formal training, because technique and formality are not mutually exclusive.
If you could explain a little bit more about what that means, just
Of
when
course,
you say
of
technical foundation,
course.
that'd be great.
I have there are a ton of tips and tricks that we learn. A lot of my, technique comes from watching people at a park or in an airport and seeing how they communicate different feelings to one another, right? Um, this this is because I'm an actor. And I use this knowledge in directing all the time, especially teaching kids. This goes back to that link again. People show us all day in the real world how to communicate feelings to one another. All you got to do is watch, right? And so if you can live in these circumstances, when these feelings come up spontaneously for you as you're working, and you have the muscle memory from watching other people, to respond authentically and communicate that to the back row, right? I like to practice. I talk on the phone a lot. I love to talk on the phone, because it shows me how to get a point across when all that I have is my voice, right? We're so very connected to each other, and we have these supercomputers in our pockets that we can see each other whenever we want. And we forgot how to call our grandma long distance after 8 p.m. so it didn't cost 50 cents, right? We're forgetting how to stop texting and call our friends. So get on there, call your friends, and feel what it feels like to communicate a point using only your voice, or conversely, sit far away from someone and watch what it looks like to have someone communicate something using only your body. Strengthen these muscles and then bring those together and show what you can do in a 400 seat house, right? Keep these tricks in your toolbox and use them to express what you are authentically feeling that you wouldn't otherwise be able to communicate to the balcony.
That's great advice. That's great advice. I also just want to follow up. Are you sure you're 26? Because you mentioned calling your grandma after 8 to
No.
save the money. And I'm like,
Oh, I had to do that until I was like 10.
Which was
You'd
like
be,
2 days
I
ago,
won't tell
right?
you how long.
Yeah.
I won't tell you how long we had dial up. My mother would be embarrassed and she's watching this.
Yeah, there was. I saw a meme where somebody was like, "What was that horrible dial-up noise?" They didn't know what it was, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
I still wake up to it some nights.
Is that your? That's funny.
It's like, is that what I heard? No, it couldn't be.
Phantom PTSD from early internet days. All right, so just a fun, silly little question as we're winding down our hour here. If there was one audition song that was brought into the room that you never wanted to hear again, what would that be?
Vanilla ice cream.
Vanilla ice cream.
Sorry. Yeah. If you bring it, every time that I've heard it, except for the first time that I hear it on that day, I've usually heard it 3 or 4 times the day. I've usually heard it 3 or 4 times before you, and I will try my hardest to listen and find something new. But if you're going into audition, don't make your auditors try hard to see who you are.
Right. Yeah.
It's the high note won't get the job. Right?
No.
The high note may be great, but if you can't tell a story, that won't get the job. So really pick a song that you could tell a story with that you love. Because if you come in with a song you don't love because everybody's doing it, I will know.
Absolutely.
I will know.
Absolutely. It's very, very apparent if you're not in love with your material.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of being in love with your material, what is a song that you could hear over and over again?
I wish I heard Now You Know from Merrily We Roll Along. and not everybody that comes to audition for me after this is going to walk in with it. But
just as a piece of advice, remember, bringing Sondheim in without knowing your accompanist is a horrible idea. I just want to put that out there. So, but continue on.
Right. But I've worked with accompanists and I know, and I have it, I have songs like these that are, I don't sing that song, but I love to hear it when it can be done because you really can tell a story and there's a lot of great beats.
Absolutely.
That you could take. However, if you know your accompanist and you can bring in, I like to keep, the hard songs in my back pocket and think like, oh, I'd really love to do this.
Right.
But only if that person is in the room.
Absolutely.
Because I've heard them play it before. And if they happen to be in the room, whip it out. Then make it happen.
It's something that doesn't happen here, but it does happen in New York. Was they would always list who was in the room, and you would have that on a lot of the auditions that are here. You don't necessarily know who you're going to get when you walk in the room. So you walk in, you're like, "Oh, it's you! I'm so excited that it's you behind the piano. I can pull out this song. I can change, but." I don't know. Food for thought, Seattle theaters. Put that out there for your audition notices. Who's going to be in the room? It might.
And if you don't, nobody's gonna slap your wrist for asking the monitor.
No, exactly. Ask them, hey, who's in the room? That's totally fine to ask that question for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We are about ready to wind down this wonderful
I could do this for hours.
Oh, me too. You're delightful. But we're about ready to wind down. We've got a couple of questions here. And if you do have questions for Tyler, please pop them in the chat window and we will get to them. The first one comes to us from Bobby and takes us a little bit back to our conversation in terms of Black Lives Matters and being an ally and things like that. And her question is, what are you reading to educate yourself to be an anti-racist? What's the material that you're consuming right now to better yourself?
I need to be honest with you, and I need to do more. But I have been looking quite a lot to Seattle Children's Theater and Taproot have both put out really great statements of what they're doing for positive forward action. And I've emailed them and thanked my people there and said, thank you for that. And I'm digging into these resources now. A lot of my action items have been about putting my money where my mouth is, and supporting the people that are close to me in Chicago, supporting the people that are close to me here. And I've put down my novels and I'm ready to start digging through more. So it's going to be a continuation. And I would start I'm starting with those theaters if you'd like to as well. But when I find things, I know what you'd be into, and I know what might help you, because I love to keep these open, emotional, spiritual dialogues with you. So I will be sending some your way.
Great. Thank you for that. Next question comes from Tom Miller, and Tom asks, "What do you wish you learned in college that you didn't know you needed to know?" What a great question.
Oh,
And we'll give
how
you a
did
second to think about that, Tyler. Just as a reminder, friends, we are doing an interview with Tyler Harr. If you are interested and want to ask him questions, pop it into the comment field now so we can get that up on the screen. All right, Tyler, what is the thing that you wish you learned in college that you didn't know you needed to know?
I think how to be myself. There's this very mystifying idea in the theater, and everyone will ask for advice on what to do in an audition, and everyone will tell you, be yourself. And I didn't know what that meant for a very, very long time. And I think, and I hope that you will tell your future alumni and your playwriting students. Tom Miller taught my playwriting class. He's why I know some of what I know. I think that finding material that resonates with you and inserting a part of yourself into it is what it means to me to be yourself. There's really no better way for me to see who you are than through the actions and through the ways that you engage with material I've seen for a very long time, because that also tells me how vulnerable you can be. And then also tells me your ability to tell a story in a way that is all yours, that is different from all of the other people that have tried to tell the same story. That is what makes your authenticity and your uniqueness shine to me. And I wish I knew that, how to be myself.
What a great answer. Elizabeth asks, during this time of stay at home, how are you keeping your skills sharp?
Oh, I try to sing every day. Sorry, roomies. I know you're watching. I try to sing every day. I go out, I walk almost every day when it's sunny out, and I listen to music that is sometimes the arts and sometimes not the arts. But how can I move my body? How can I interpret this music with my body? Because there's not a soul on South Beacon Avenue right now. So I can walk up and down it and do whatever I want and not have to worry about looking like a fool. Not that I worry about that too often anyway. But yes, I am these skills, this empathy, this listening, singing, dancing, communicating emotions. These are the foundations of what we do, and they're muscles that we must exercise. So I make sure that I find a way to exercise each of those muscles a little bit every day.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, staying sharp. It's hard sometimes, I think, with
It's
this
hard.
isolation to remember that we have to keep our skills sharp so that way we're ready to hit the ground running when all of this is over and we get to do the things that we love again.
Yeah.
In the future. Speaking of future, the worst segue ever that I just gave you.
Speaking of future.
Speaking of future, but actually, I'm going to hold off on that question because we just had another question come through. But Kevin asks, as an actor, what do you like to do right before entering an audition? And as a director, what do you do to prep for the audition day?
Oh, good question. Hi, Kevin. Miss you. As an actor, right before I walk into the room, I speak to no one except who I have to speak to. And this may be news for some of you that look like but I like to put headphones in, and if I see a friend, it's a hi. And I spend my drive out to that audition, getting into that space of that character, putting myself into those personal circumstances. I talk to myself on the drive to an audition about I talk to myself about living in that circumstance and the things that I would say if I was there. Again, insert myself into these circumstances, right? That's what they want to see. That's how you can be most authentic.
Hmm.
As a director, I'm very specific about what I need to tell the story. the kind of actors that I need, the kind of actors that the story needs, and the talents that the story needs. And then I kind of leave the rest of it open and hope that my actors will convince me, right? There's nothing I love more than having my mind changed in an audition room by a powerful audition. But again, it speaks to my directing style as well. I have a wish list. I'm a wish list director, and I have things I know that I need. And if someone else can bring me something new, it really hypes me up to try to work that into the vision that already exists.
Absolutely. Diving into the collaboration of that, as you mentioned before. Ashley asks, can you share your mission statement with us? So if you were to have a mission statement, what would that be?
Yeah. And I should have a succinct, like, publishable statement that I am working on. But I believe that I was put on this earth to exercise and teach empathy. That's something I will tell anyone who asks. Theater and storytelling, especially as it pertains to the medium of theater, is the best way that I know to exercise that muscle. So I look to that. And whenever I sit and I question my purpose, oh my God, should I be doing this? Like, whenever I sit with my heart of hearts, it's not a debate anymore, right? This is the best way that I know to spread the good of my purpose and my beliefs in this world. And if I try to spread them in a different way or in a less effective way, it's a missed opportunity.
Anthony asks, are there shows that you feel aren't done very often that you would like to see done more and want to work on if the opportunity arises? And I'm going to combine that with Carissa's question here, which is, what's a show you're excited to direct in the future? Because they may be one and the same. But I'll put Anthony's question back up there and let you tackle that one first.
Well, I think I've just been, since the day that I heard the album, I've been dying to do a production of Parade. That's one thing I don't see often. I think that there are problems in the script that I would love to tackle. I'd love to call in my POC friends to help me tackle these things and, like, be a check and a balance when I think that my heart is in the right place, but my action may be different. There are problems in this play that we have to tackle before we try to put it up again. And yeah, Parade is one of them. My holy grail of directing is Lionel Bart's Oliver. I think that it's not done very often. And I look to the movie quite a bit. I wish that in the 60s things moved faster, but it's a different style, like, watching that movie. And I have so many ideas in my head about how I would make this bing bang boom production of Oliver that moves fast, communicates all the same message, because it really is a timeless show. That's why it's lasted so long, because it's timeless. And I have so many ideas for how to put Oliver in front of a 2020 audience and give them a lot of the same valuable messages that they still need to hear.
Interesting. We should talk more about that offline. I'd love to hear more of that.
Dying
Britt asks, if you had the choice, do you prefer creating stories in a large house or more intimate venue?
Thanks, Britt. I love a big venue. And it is a personal goal of mine to be working in these big venues all the time, and to be telling these big stories that we think we know in different ways in these big venues. There are plays. The first show that I ever saw in Seattle, fun fact, you had Teresa Thuman on last week. The first show that I ever saw in Seattle was The Last Days of Judas Iscariot at Sound Theater Company. And I don't ever want to see that play on a stage bigger than that. The intimacy is almost its own character in that show. And so I try to lean towards the big houses because that aligns with a lot of, the big flashy things that I like to do.
Sure.
And there's a time and a place for a small theater, and I will sink my teeth into it when I get the chance.
That's great. Ashley asks, how do you decompress after an audition as an actor and as a director?
Mm-hmm. After an audition, well, I like to call Ashley after an audition. She knows that. And one thing that they did teach in college, and one thing that they drilled into my head in my training, was positive self-assessments, a PSA, right? And I'm sure this isn't a new idea to many of you, but leave that audition and find your strengths, right? It's much easier to leave the audition all like ruffled feathers and what have you. And every time that I do that, I black out and completely forget how my audition went. I completely forget, and it's never productive. So I leave and I say, I killed this. I did this great. I did this really well. And I did this really well. Those all came natural to me. Next time I go into an audition, let's do 3 more things really well, right? So as I leave auditions as a director, I don't think about it at all. As I leave auditions as an auditor, as a director, I don't think about it at all I try to go to sleep and get up and then think about it. Because there's a lot of talking and an exchanging of ideas right after auditions happen. Who do we want? Who do we want to call back? And if the goal is decompression, I just got to get it all out, go to sleep, tackle it in an organized way the next day so that I'm doing my best service to the play.
That's great. We're going to wind up our question and answer period here. We've got 2 more questions left, and we're going to finish with this one, which comes to us from RMHS Theater YouTube channel, which is, what do you hope for your future?
I hope for a more open dialogue and exchange of art with the people that I look up to and the people that I aspire to grow and to emulate as a professional. A lot of my mentors have been really, really great about supporting me and about being there when I need questions and things like that. And as I build a network, I hope it's important to me that these people will invest in what I'm doing and the ideas that I'm giving to them, because I have a lot to offer them, as I am investing in these places that I want to work.
Tyler, imagine sometime in the future, it's now opening night. You're either as a director or an actor, you finally reach that point of opening night after all of this COVID nonsense and the craziness that's going on in the world right now. What's the one word that pops to your mind as you think about that moment right there as that curtain is going up?
Finally. Finally. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard when you put your identity into a profession. If you've ever watched a dancer get injured, you know what that is. You're a dancer. Absolutely. It's hard when you put your identity into something and then the world tells you and everybody else whose identity is in that thing, no, not right now.
Not right now.
And you have to be okay with it. Or just sit in a room and panic and never get out of bed, right? You got to be okay with that. So when we're back, my soul will be aligned with this earth again.
That's great. And on that, we are going to conclude our interview with Tyler. Tyler, I know the time just flew by. You were wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your thoughts and ideas.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you. So, for everybody else, I just want to thank you for spending this evening with us here at Deep Dive. I hope you enjoyed the show. And the next episode, I'm really excited. We're going to have Kathy Shea joining us. We're going to have a great conversation with Kathy Shea. So, keep an eye out on my director's page for information about when that will be announcing. I think we're looking at June 23rd, but we'll be confirming those details and getting those out to you. Again, thank you to Tyler for giving up his evening and for answering your questions. Thank you all for having such great questions. And for Deep Dive, I'm Harry Turpin, reminding you to trust yourself, to be yourself. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.